When it comes to wartime dominance in the skies, there can only be one. But when it comes to ubiquitous manned attack aircraft of the 21st century, the title of best in the world is very much in dispute. Offered up by the United States as an innovative close air support aircraft, the Fairchild Republic A-10 Thunderbolt, better known as the Warthog, has been kicking ass in midair since the 70s. But on the other side of the world, the Soviet-designed Sukhoi Su-25 Grach, better known as the Frogfoot, has been in service for nearly as long, and it's proven itself to be an absolute master of the same craft where the Warthog lays claim to greatness. In today's episode of Mega Projects, we're going to try something a little bit new. This is something that we're calling Mega Projects Matchups, where we're going to pit the Warthog and the Frogfoot against each other and try and settle a simple question. Which aircraft reigns supreme? If you'd like to find out, of course, settle in. And if you'd like to see more of these Mega Projects matchups in the future, then let us know in the comments below. Let us know what you'd like to see. And, well, maybe we'll make them, won't we? Alright, so the first of our two fighters today is the A-10, an American warplane built by the Fairchild Republic subsidiary of Global Defense Corporation Northrop Grumman. Built to be what is essentially a platform to carry heavy ordnance, the Warthog is distinguished not just by its firepower, but by its unbelievable levels of survivability while under attack. And though its production line has been closed since 1984, nearly 300 of the planes are still in service in the US Air Force and subordinate branches of the American military. Across the battlefield, we've got the Soviet-era Su-25, developed by the famed Sukhoi Design Bureau in Moscow at the height of the Cold War. Made to be nimble, heavily armed, and an absolute menace to the ground forces opposing it, the Su-25 is a purpose-built instrument intended to turn the tide of frontline battles wherever they crop up. Initially introduced in the early 1980s, the Frogfoot continued to be built through the 2010s, and the nation of Georgia still retains the ability to make more. Now, we've already done a deep dive on the A-10 and its own dedicated video on this channel, and so too for the Su-25, so for both aircraft, and so we're going to focus on the details that are especially relevant to weigh them against each other, specifically their specifications, their weapon systems, and their capabilities in battle. And to do this, let's start off with the A-10. Now, the Warthog sits at a length of 53 feet 4 inches, or just over 16 meters, with a wingspan of 57.5 feet, that's 17.5 meters, and an empty weight of 14.5 tons. It can carry nearly double its own weight, 25.5 tons, including fuel and munitions, and it hits a top speed of about 420 miles per hour, or 700 kilometers per hour, at a little over half the speed of sound. Just before we continue with today's video, I want to share something with you. Meet Holzkern, a brand that is unique. Now, if you're a nature enthusiast, you'll fall in love with Holzkern's products, because they're partially made from natural materials, making each piece unique. And here's the kicker. All their wood in the watches is FSC certified, meaning there's no deforestation. It's a brand that really does care for the planet. They began with watches, and today they offer so much more, like jewelry and sunglasses. With over 1,000 designs on their website, there's something for every nature lover. Holzkern's come a long way with more than 10 physical stores in Austria and Germany, and they've brought smiles to over 1 million customers in just 7 years. How can Holzkern enrich your life? Well, if you're planning a getaway, their sunglasses are a must. A special night out, a Holzkern watch is a conversation starter. And here's the best part. Holzkern is offering an incredible Black Friday week deal and discounts all the way until the 27th. It's just around the corner. It's a perfect chance to spoil yourself and your loved ones. Click the link below or visit holzkern.com/megaprojects and explore the magical world of Holzkern. And now back to today's video. More important, it can loiter over the battlefield at speeds as low as 150 miles per hour. The Warthog boasts a combat range of 250 miles, 460 kilometers, with 10 minutes spent in combat, a service ceiling of 45,000 feet or 13,700 meters, and it flies with a crew of 1, who's tasked with not only flying their plane, but also raining death down on the enemy. In terms of what the Warthog can carry, munitions-wise, it's probably a better question to ask, well, what can't it carry? Fitted with 11 pylons, including 3 under the fuselage and 8 on the wings, the plane can carry up to 10 Maverick air-to-surface missiles using high-penetration warheads and infrared guidance systems to fire over 45 kilometers. It can also carry 2 Sidewinder air-to-air short-range missiles, or up to 6 rocket pods, although its actual rocket payload maxes out when it carries 4 bigger rocket pods, with a total of 76 rockets per plane in that arrangement. It can carry Mark 80 gravity bombs, Mark 77 incendiary bombs, various kinds of cluster bombs, Paveway series laser-guided bombs, GPS-guided bombs, or precision cluster bombs using Lockheed Martin's wind-corrected munitions dispenser. so it could carry a lot. And all of this is to say nothing of the A-10's most famous weapon, its Avenger rotary cannon and the corresponding 1,174 rounds that it can fire when fully loaded. And then there's all the plane's other bells and whistles. Its avionics include specialized targeting pods and electronic countermeasures to prevent it from being locked onto, and the plane has the option to carry flares, chaff, and extra fuel tanks to extend its range. Its cockpit is insulated by all-round armor, including a so-called bathtub structure of titanium up to about 4 centimeters thick. Its bubble canopy is bulletproof and built to give all-round vision, and the pilot is granted a heads-up targeting display, inertial navigation, and a tactical air navigation system, plus embedded GPS and a terrain mapping system. The A-10 features night vision goggles, and its powerful twin engines mounted high on the fuselage are designed so that even if one engine is rendered inoperable, the plane can continue flying. In practice, it's orbit indestructible, able to withstand major damage to its tail and wings, and it's equipped with double redundant flight systems. Further, it's built to take off on really short runways, and while it sacrifices agility and speed to do its job, it's excellent as an endurance weapon to be used under fire. And now, of course, let's talk about the Su-25. The Frogfoot is a one-seater aircraft built at a length of 47.5 feet, that's 14.5 meters, and a wingspan of about 51 feet. Sitting empty, it weighs just under 11 tons, although it can fill to a max takeoff weight of very nearly double that at 21.25 tons. The Frogfoot hits a maximum speed of 606 miles per hour, 975 kilometers an hour, and its stall speed, although not publicized, is likely comparable to that of the A-10, if not lower due to its wing design and relatively lightweight. It's got a combat range of 470 miles, 750 kilometers, and a low service ceiling at just 23,000 feet or 7,000 meters. In terms of armament, the Su-25 is equipped with 11 hardpoints capable of carrying several different kinds of air-to-ground missiles or a smaller number of air-to-air missiles on the outer wing pylons. Alternatively, the Su-25 can carry numerous rocket pods for both guided and unguided ordnance, or it can carry laser-guided bombs, incendiary bombs, or cluster bombs depending on the needs of an individual mission. It's equipped with a twin-barrel autocannon capable of carrying 250 rounds, and it can integrate 2 additional gun pods carrying 260 rounds each. Like the A-10, the Frogfoot encases its pilot in a bathtub-style titanium alloy shell, as well as having an armored windscreen. The plane features a heads-up display, an integrated navigation and targeting system, a laser rangefinder and target designator, a radar jammer, and a radar warning receiver. The Frogfoot has the capacity to deploy chaff and flares for its own protection, and it's outfitted with air navigation system, friend or foe identifiers, and the option to carry up to 4 external fuel tanks. It's built to operate on very short runways in austere environments, and it's got a reputation for durability under fire, recently seen shrugging off hard hits during service on both sides of the air war in Ukraine. Now, based off these attributes, we can dole out a few advantages in a few areas. The A-10 takes the cake on durability, at least in theory, due to its ability to keep fighting with a full engine loss and its built-in system redundancies. On the other hand, the Su-25's smaller size, its wing design, the placement of its engines, and its lower weight make it more maneuverable and nimble in combat environments. The Su-25 claims a decisive speed advantage and has a better functional range, while the A-10 has a higher service ceiling and a marginally superior ability to carry ordnance. The actual weapons it carries are more advanced, and its autocannon is much better, while also carrying over triple the number of rounds. But where the A-10 really comes away is in its avionics, granting its pilot a far better situational awareness in contested airspace. But look, we can't get a full view of either aircraft by just accounting for their specs on paper. Instead, we've got to view them in context, where both the Warthog and the Frogfoot have proven themselves to be assets in combat environments. After a brief non-combat experience over the skies of Grenada in 1983, the A-10 first saw combat during Operation Desert Storm, where the plane was responsible for 900 tank kills, 1,200 destroyed artillery pieces, and 2,000 other destroyed military vehicles. 132 of the planes were deployed, giving an average of over 30 targets destroyed per plane, even before we account for stationary targets like bunkers or supply depots. A-10s also claimed 2 helicopters during their time over Iraq, both using their cannons, although 4 of the planes were shot down and 13 others sustained significant combat damage. The planes flew 8,100 sorties during the operation, more than paying back their limited losses, though we do have to note that the attrition rate of the Warthog was worrying enough that for most of the conflict it was restricted in its combat range to within 20 miles of the Iraqi border. The A-10 also saw limited use in Bosnia and Herzegovina in the mid-1990s, attacking Bosnian Serb artillery, and they returned to Kosovo to carry out ground attack and close air support missions. During Operation Iraqi Freedom, A-10s fired hundreds of thousands of rounds of ammunition and maintained a mission-capable rate of 85%, although one A-10 was down during the operation. Later in the war, between 2009 and 2012, A-10s flew an average of around 30,000 sorties a year, and from 2006 to 2013, they were responsible for nearly 20% of close air support missions in the conflict. They saw limited action in Libya before turning to carry out large-scale attacks against Islamic State positions in Iraq and Syria. During all these sorties, the A-10 has emerged to fight another day, with the last confirmed loss of an A-10 coming in 2003 when a pilot was shot down by an Iraqi surface-to-air missile. On the other hand, it's also important to recognize the US Air Force's own approach towards its aging attack plane, which has been on the budgetary chopping block for the better part of a decade. Although the US Congress has been adamant about keeping the Warthog in service, the Air Force has nonetheless slashed its maintenance budget and done their very best to phase it out, expressing concern with its ability to survive in heavily contested airspace. It's important to take into account exactly what that means here. After all, the A-10 is just fine when it's performing counterinsurgency operations or fighting in areas where the United States' other combat aircraft have established air superiority. Instead, the Air Force's concerns reflect the problem that all close air support planes, including the Su-25 Frogfoot, would face in such an environment. Specifically, that they're really no good in a dogfight and are badly outmatched in air-to-air capabilities by other fighter aircraft, and that the more advanced air defense systems around the world can deal with them pretty easily. And speaking of the Frogfoot, the Su-25 began its own service life during the Soviet invasion of Afghanistan in the 1980s, where the plane proved to be a highly effective weapon against the local Mujahideen vendors. According to Sukhoi, the Su-25 performed 60,000 sorties in Afghanistan, including an average of 360 sorties per year per aircraft. During the 8-year war, at least 21 of the aircraft were lost, although a number of them were destroyed on the ground rather than in the air. The Su-25 proved more than capable of dealing with tactical conditions in its battles against the Mujahideen, and although it was unable to truly shift the balance of power in the war, it created no problems for its Soviet handlers. Around the same time, Su-25s performed up to 15 sorties per day each during the Iran-Iraq War in service with the Iraqi Air Force. With a total of 900 sorties during the war, only one Su-25 was lost due to Iranian fire, and it was the linchpin to counterattacks that allowed Iraq to finish the war on terms of a stalemate, rather than a territorial loss. Now, the question at hand in this video, Su-25 versus A-10, could have been conclusively settled during the Gulf War, but unfortunately for the Frogfoot, most Iraqi planes were destroyed on the runway during the start of the coalition air campaign, while a few others fled to Iran. 2 of the Frogfoots tried to back up a pair of MiG-21 fighter jets and get the jump on a pair of F-15C Eagles, but that went extremely poorly and concluded the Frogfoot's role in the air war with 2 air-to-air losses and 0 kills. They got significantly more use during the various post-Soviet conflicts of the 1990s, distinguishing themselves during the Abkhazian War and both Chechen wars, where they were a favorite of Russian forces and flew tens of thousands of sorties. They saw service in Ethiopia, Macedonia, Darfur, and on the Ivory Coast, and Iran used 2 of the planes to take down a US Predator drone in 2012. Russia has used the Frogfoot en masse in Georgia in 2008 in its low-grade war in the Donbass region of Ukraine and in its military interventions in Iraq and Syria, as well as flying over 3,500 sorties against the Islamic State. They've showed up again in service to Armenia during the Nagorno-Karabakh War of 2020, and during its service in Ukraine, the Frogfoot has shown up in service to both the Russian and Ukrainian air forces, although both sides have largely avoided manned air-to-air battles in the last year or so. So when comparing the combat performance of these 2 planes, it's important to note that the available data biases the results in a couple of different ways. On the one hand, the Su-25 has seen a lot more service, it's performed a lot more sorties, and thus it's destroyed a whole lot more enemy targets than the A-10 has, and although statistics on its performance are incomplete, it certainly leads the A-10 in terms of sheer number of kills. That being said, the Su-25 It's also been shot down many more times than the A-10, although it's important to consider that the Su-25 has been involved in significantly more battles in contested airspace. That is to say, it's had to deal with many more enemy planes and weapon systems that were able and willing to shoot it down, while the A-10's deployments have seen it largely opposite disorganized or under-equipped forces that have no real hope of touching it in the skies. Once we screen these biases out as best we can, we're left with a few key conclusions. The Su-25 has proven itself capable of running a whole lot of sorties with an individual plane in short spans of time, enduring damage and returning to the air with no real maintenance. On the other hand, the A-10 has proven its edge in being able to take more punishment, especially from ground forces. Not only can it endure more per plane, but fewer planes have been lost per sortie. This is even after accounting for the more harsh combat environments of the Su-25 and after acknowledging that the number of lost Su-25s we have is probably an undercount. However, we still can't overstate the importance of the A-10's combat operations being in uncontested airspace, while the Su-25 frequently deals with the constant threat of an enemy air force whose power matches or exceeds its own. Now, it's important we recognize here at Mega Projects that we don't have monopoly on questions comparing the A-10 and the Su-25. Although it's squarely in the realm of the hypothetical, the question is critically important for militaries that employ either aircraft, and while they're generally incentivized to keep their conclusions to themselves, they sometimes see fit to share indicators here and there about just how valuable each aircraft is relative to the other. A first and rather recent clue comes out of Ukraine amidst discussions in 2022 over what aircraft is most appropriate for the United States to provide to Ukrainians for their ongoing air defense against Russia. Although the A-10 has been a favorite suggestion from both US military analysts and commenters on our sister channel Warthog Graphics, the Ukrainian military has categorically declined the A-10 as a weapons offering, at least until more appropriate craft like the F-16 fighter jet arrived at the conflict. There are a few key reasons for this. The A-10 lacks any ability to deal with Russian surface-to-air missiles. It can't defend against Russian fighters, and it's a plane that might be useful to have today, but it won't be helpful in a few years or even a decade or two. Most important for our purposes, though, Ukraine believes that the A-10 offers no real combat advantages over its existing fleet of Su-25s. Although Ukrainian military advisor Yuri Sak acknowledged the A-10's ability to destroy ground targets and the greater sophistication of the ordnance it usually carries compared to the Frogfoot, Sak has explained that the A-10 offers no strategic or tactical improvements over the Frogfoot in practice, at least not in Ukraine. We're also able to confront the issue, at least somewhat, that comes from the A-10 having seen much less adversity in combat than the Su-25 has. When asked about the A-10's vulnerability against surface-to-air weapons compared to the Su-25, researcher Justin Bronk explained to Business Insider that neither aircraft can detect incoming rockets fired from man-powered weapons or the shoulder-fired heat-seeking missiles that have become a hallmark of 21st century combat. The A-10s have thicker armor, and their exhaust system gives off less of a heat signature, but man-powered weapons are just as much a danger for the Warthog as the Frogfoot. And some private sector experts have taken on Warthog versus Frogfoot questions directly. In one analysis, Warrior Maven's Chris Osborne points out that the A-10's durability and system redundancies are clear advantages over the Su-25. In another, aviation writer Dario Leon of the Aviation Geek Club cites an expert on Russian aviation, quoted via Quora, who pointed out that the Su-25's higher cruise speed, abilities to take off on just about any type of runway, and ability to run on almost any fuel type make it a much more utilitarian tool. On the other hand, the A-10's ability to refuel in mid-air was explained as being far less important, while the A-10's heavy gun has proven less effective in practice than the lighter Su-25 cannon. The A-10 can carry far heavier ordnance, while the Su-25 actually features heavier titanium plating to protect the pilot, according to expert Stepan Shabanov. Finally, defense commentator Charlie Gao of the National Interest explains that the Su-25 has largely been upgraded to modern standard, at least in service to militaries like Russia that have the option to do so. The Su-25 is more biased towards so-called fire-and-forget weapons like laser-guided weaponry and unguided bombs, while the A-10 is built for pilots to focus on the operation of its forward cannons and electro-optical weapons. With all of that being said, it's finally time to dig into the question at hand. Which aircraft is better? We're going to answer in two parts. First, in a direct head-to-head confrontation, and then in terms of mission capacity. Which plane is better in a fight, and most importantly, which plane is better at its job. So when it comes to a direct air-to-air fight between these two planes, we're not going to mince words. More times than not, the Frogfoot should come home victorious. In terms of air-to-air armament, both planes will generally fly with a loadout of 2 air-to-air missiles, the Sidewinder for the A-10 and a few options for the Su-25, including the K-13, which is just a reverse-engineered Sidewinder. While the A-10 has better jamming countermeasures to ensure that it's not locked onto, both planes are equipped with flares and chaff that can deal with each other's air-to-air missiles. And once this turns into a dogfight, the Su-25 holds all the cards. It's more maneuverable, it turns far better, it's quicker by a wide margin, and while the A-10 cannon is iconic, it also impacts the A-10's flight in ways that the Su-25 can exploit. After that, it's up to the A-10's durability, but while there's a chance the plane and its pilot may not be brought down, durability is no good for a counterattack, especially if, say, the loss of an engine further inhibits the plane's mobility. Long story short, if an A-10 pilot and an Su-25 pilot really decide to brawl, the Frogfoot is the one that's walking away. But luckily for fans of the A-10, that isn't really the question that matters. As long as both planes are working with competent militaries, the Frogfoot and the Warthog should either not be coming into contact at all, or if they do, they should both be focused on destroying ground forces and evading fighter planes rather than beefing with each other. In their shared mission role, the A-10 has some undeniable advantages over the Su-25. It can use heavier weapons to do more damage on the ground, and it can endure more damage from small arms fire than the Su-25 can. And its avionics suite still outpaces the Frogfoot even after the Su-25's upgrades. And when that iconic cannon is working, it is an undeniably effective tool against enemy emplacements on the ground. That means that the A-10 can do more damage per plane and has a better chance of returning to base, and even though the A-10 probably isn't going to still be flying after a direct man-pad hit or an attack from a more sophisticated fighter plane, well, neither's the Frogfoot. But even still, the Frogfoot offers material advantages that cannot be ignored. Its maneuverability is good for far more than just dogfights, giving it the ability to evade enemy fire and attack from different vectors, while its speed, range, ease of takeoff, and short turnaround time between sorties mean that it can get to the fight quicker, stay there for longer, and deliver more ordnance over multiple trips than the A-10 could do in one. Its airframe is less durable overall, but on balance, an Su-25 pilot is likely safer in the cockpit than an A-10 pilot due to the amount of overall armoring across the airframe. Get hit with the same man-pad, and Su-25 pilots are generally able to eject and survive, while there's simply no real-world examples on how an A-10 pilot would fare. When it comes to the ultimate question of mission role, the winner really does depend on what you're looking for. If your metric for success is a plane that can deliver massive hits, endure whatever comes back, and scare the living crap out of an enemy on the ground, the A-10 Warthog is the first and really the only choice. But if you're a pragmatist looking for tactical utility, the Su-25 is very, very hard to look away from. The advantages the Su-25 offers over the A-10 are advantages that other American planes like the F-15E, the F-16, and F-35 also provide, but the A-10 doesn't. If we're taking both the Su-25 and the A-10 for a mission role they share, the award for most impressive sortie is probably going to go to the A-10. But one sortie doesn't win a war. And if you're looking for the close air support plane that's the best long-term asset you can find, then you're looking for an Su-25. 1-0 Frogfoot.